Welcome to the Taylor Made Tasty podcast. I'm Taylor, retired serial quitter turned goal boss coach, speaker, and consultant. I believe a beautiful life starts with a beautiful mindset. Join me as we amplify confidence, resilience, and actionable tools on the road to quit quitting on you and your vision. You are worthy of your goals, so let's go get there. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Taylor Made Tasty, the podcast. Today we have a deep subject that I know we all understand is important, but have to continuously work on too, because a larger aspect of overall well-being and mental health is about how much worth we value in ourselves. And this episode is about the 4 pillars of building self-worth. Along with my guest, Elizabeth, we discuss how important self-awareness, self-empowerment, self-care, and self-love are to building your self-worth. And spoiler alert, they all start with self. Meaning the goal of this episode is to work on building towards being able to feel good about yourself with no influence from another person or an outside source. A little bit about our guest. Elizabeth Correia is a transformational speaker, author, and coach. She is the founder of Correia Enterprise, a women's platform for personal growth and lifestyle design. Elizabeth empowers women around the world to raise their level of awareness by helping them remember and recognize their inner beauty and true self-worth. With her charismatic, unapologetically stylish presence and relatable storytelling, she gives women the permission to be themselves and the tools to create a life of joy, purpose, freedom, and fulfillment. Please help me welcome Elizabeth to the show, and let's get into it. Hi, Elizabeth. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for coming on. I am excited because we're talking about building your self-worth, and I think that self-worth is at the core of our very selves, our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, like intimately tied into how we view our worthiness and value as human beings. And I think we understand how important it is to have high self-worth, but not necessarily all the positivity or benefits that can come from it. So can you explain why self-worth is so important to our lives and what the major benefits could be to our lives?
Oh gosh, there's so many benefits, and it's obviously so important in terms of relationships, in terms of our purpose, our work. Who we're being, what we're doing in the world, how we show up, the boundaries that we set. Standards. Like it's connected to really your whole being. If we're not loving ourselves, it's evident not only to ourselves how we feel, but to others as well in relationships and how we're showing up. And that could be professional relationships, that could be personal. It could be with our spouses, with our partners, it could be with our coworkers and managers, right? The people that we interact with in business. So it's crucial. It's crucial to our own fulfillment. Yeah, it's crucial. Mm-hmm.
So would you say like self-worth is we're creating our own boundaries, we're not being a doormat, we're kind of building a life that we love because of how we feel about ourselves and we know the value that we bring?
Yeah, that's interesting that you put it that way because self love and self worth, and it took me a while to understand the difference or to even know that there was a difference. Self love or, self esteem, it's what we think about ourselves, it's how we feel about ourselves, and it's what we believe ultimately about ourselves. Whereas self worth is the recognition that you are worthy, that you are a valuable human being who is worthy of love. So I'll give an example. There when I was on my self-love journey, and and really starting to feel like I was loving myself and I love myself, not totally completely. And I don't know if we ever get to that place of perfection, because then you stop learning. If you stop learning, you stop growing. So for me, it was kind of in the middle stage where I was like, yeah, I'm starting to, like really love myself and take care of myself. And at that time, I still didn't feel worthy of certain things in my life. For instance, you know, a raise or a promotion. I didn't feel worthy or qualified for that raise or for that promotion. I was afraid to ask for it. I kind of doubted myself, like, will I get the raise? Will they think, oh no, you're not worthy of that raise? You don't bring enough to the table. So it didn't mean that I wasn't loving myself. It meant that I wasn't quite there yet. So I kept continued working on myself in terms of loving myself, and I got to a place where it was I no doubt I was worth that promotion and worth that raise, and with confidence I'd ask for it. Or even if it's not your job, your career, it could be your business. You have a set fee, and you bring down that fee because you just maybe doubting whether you're worth that amount. And now it's like, no, this is my fee and this is what I'm worth, and I know what I bring to the table, and that's that. So it's the two just are different.
Yeah, I think so many words can be thrown at us that makes us feel, we have to have high self-esteem and high self confidence and high self-respect, like you were talking about. And they all tie together, right? There's a common thread, but they're not all the same thing. But I feel like if someone is having a hard time feeling any of those things, like where would you recommend starting to have them build towards self-worth?
So there are, I call them the pillars, the pillars to self worth. And I discovered these pillars again while I was on my own journey. You often hear you got to love yourself, and you don't love yourself enough, and love yourself and love yourself. And, we were being bombarded with these self love messages. But how do we do that? You just wake up and start, it's so much more than manicures and pedicures and facials, right? It's deep inner work. And when I go back and evaluate the journey and what happened for me and how what that looked like, I first started, which is personally I think the where you should start with any healing journey, not just because you're on this journey to self-worth, but self-awareness. For me, I had to get really clear with my truth, and own it and stop running from it. This is what's happening. These are the I am in a toxic relationship. I am being abused. I am not appreciated. I whatever it is, whatever the struggles are, whatever the shame is, whatever the ugly stuff is, we have to own it, speak it, say it, like, this is where I am. I'm aware of what's happening, and I don't want to be here anymore. And I'm aware of what I need to do to get to a place where I feel self empowered, which is the second pillar. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Um, I think that self-awareness is, and I coach about this often and view it as extremely important to accomplishing our goals. Because that's always like with any goal, any journey you're about to go on, any um dream you have, vision you have, really like any relationship you have, like self awareness is so crucial to how we show up, right? Where are you starting? What do you know now? What do you want to know? What do you need to know in order to get to this goal, right? And so I think that that being pillar number one towards building your self worth is huge, because we need to know what is the self worth that you feel now, and what is that rooted in? Like, why are you feeling that way? Why are you feeling lack? What could make, what things in your life would make you feel more of that? And is it those things in your life that would make you feel more, or it's like the perception of, oh, you have this job, oh, you have this car, oh, you have this handbag, so now the perception is that you have self-worth, when really it's like you said, it's that deep inner work, and a lot of people just don't want to do it, and that's why we do say things like pedicures, manicures, take a bath, read a book, go on a walk. Yeah, like all of those things. And it's that's why this important conversation is happening, because I want to know, like, how do we truly build towards the self-worth that we are born with, right? Like, you are born worthy, you wake up worthy, like all of that. And how do we get more people to actually feel that? So you went through pillar number one. So could you go through the other pillars for us and kind of navigate us towards, like, what does it look like in building that self-worth?
Hmm. Yeah, so the second pillar would be self empowerment. And that comes from, feeling empowered. You don't just show up on social media or on a live or in a networking space and feel empowered. It doesn't happen that way. You have to take action. And for me, looking back on my journey, I had a lot of work to do, to feel empowered. And it started for me with sharing my truth. So self-awareness, self-acceptance, accepting my truth, what was happening, what wasn't happening. And the second was sharing my truth. And that there is a sense of empowerment that comes from storytelling, from sharing, from being a part of a movement, of a community, of a group. And there's so much greatness that came. I think that was really where I really started to get this whole self love, healing thing, was when I was a part of these groups. And I was a part of many. Like, I was involved in so much, especially in my 20s, my mid 20s to end, to early 30s. I was a part of women's groups, youth groups. It was amazing. And in those groups, I got to not only feel empowered by the other ladies and the young women while sharing my story, I was empowered by what I was able to offer them, not just what my story was offering, because I may have been at level, let's just say there's 5 levels. I may have been at level 2, and women in the room, some of them were at level 1, trying to figure out how to get to level 2. So I was empowered by the ladies that were at level 3, and I was empowering the ladies that were at level 1. So it was like a two-way thing, a give and take, and it was beautiful. And I didn't realize what those groups, and still to this day, I'm a part of so many groups. I obviously I run my own, and I host events, and it's the same. As I'm giving, I'm receiving, and it's so empowering. That's one of the things. The other um, way that I was self empowered was through studying and reading courses, investing in myself, investing in my personal professional development, learning new skills, whether it was, learning how to do web design, graphic design, learning photography, learning another language. The more you learn, the more we learn, the smarter we feel. The smarter we feel, the more we feel we have to bring to the table, bring to the relationship, bring to that group, to that community, bring to your business, to your career, to your your workplace. The more you study, the more you know, the smarter you feel, the better you feel about yourself. So I really fell in love with learning, because the more I learned, the smarter I felt. And the smarter I felt, just like I felt so bomb. Like, it was like, oh, I know this, I know that. I can join this conversation because I studied that. And I joined groups that were aligned with what I needed at the time, and also my passions. Yeah. And then
Beautiful.
from
Yeah.
self-empowered, the third pillar is self-care, which is huge. And again, it's so much more than manicures and pedicures, but manicures and pedicures and bubble baths are a part of that. They are. That is a form of taking care of yourself, but it's also that inner work. The foundation of that is forgiveness. I had a lot of unforgiveness, just boiling up inside of me, and it affected everything. It affected my level of trusting people. It affected my relationships, all relationships, whether it was business or personal. It affected everything. It just, you know, it was like I was just leading. I call it leading while bleeding versus leading while healing. So unforgiveness is another form of self-care. It's huge for self-care, because if you don't forgive and let go, you're actually, it's somewhat of, self-abuse, because you are the one entertaining it. You are the one doing this. That person or those people, they're probably not even thinking about you. They've probably hurt five more people since they've hurt you, but you're just holding it and harboring something that happened maybe 10 years ago, maybe 10 days ago. Doesn't matter. It's not a time thing. It's, you have to go through that process of forgiveness and really, start loving on yourself by letting that go, because it's really only killing you.
For self-care, I think it's so, like we brought up, right? We talked about the maybe something that people would consider smaller, like the pedicures, the manicures, the bubble baths. But I also think it's seasonally. Like sometimes self-care is as little as I can take these 5 minutes and put on a face mask right now, because that is all the capacity that I have, the energy that I have, and this is all that I can do for myself. And then there are the seasons where we have the capacity and the energy to do that deep internal work, where we are thinking like, okay, what forgiveness, what gift can I give myself of forgiveness of my actions, my inaction, things that somebody else did to me that either I had control over or I didn't have control over, like all of that stuff. And it's like that simple all-encompassing word of self-care, even though it really is like so vastly different in the acts that you can take in order to feel self-care. And I think that really has to do with like what season that you are in and the capacity that you have to give yourself in that moment.
Yeah, and you've got to, you're exactly, and it's important to do what works for you. You know, i- don't compare. Comparison is like the thief of all joy. Don't compare how you're caring and loving on yourself the way your best friend is, or maybe your neighbor, or maybe someone who's in your social media feed. You can't. When you do that comparison, it's like it stops you, it blocks you, right? Do what works for you. If it's like I did a face mask this morning. Like I try to do my face masks at 3 times a week, and it could be just a sheet.
Mhm.
The ones that it's just a sheet, a cooling sheet. It just makes a difference, and I leave it on for 5 minutes. But it's amazing how that makes me feel. I'm drinking my smoothie. I'm drinking something with purpose. It's going to feed my body. There's all kinds of goodness in there, the spirulina, the chlorella. Like it's loaded with so much goodness, and it feels good. So it's self-care. It's so much more than just working out. For some people, it's just working out. Well, working out, that's great for the physical body and the mind. It's phenomenal. But there are other little things. And in saying that, I will also say, start small. Don't overwhelm yourself. And I do believe it's how a lot of women check out. They end up checking out because it becomes too much. If you're someone who doesn't normally exercise and you're going back to the gym, don't commit to 5 days or 7 days. I've, I don't think, maybe I've probably seen one or two ladies ever in years actually go hardcore as a beginner, 7 days, and stick it out. What ends up happening is you crash. but start off with saying, I'm going to go every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I'm going to do 20 minutes, or I'm going to do 20 minutes at home. Maybe in 30 days, challenge yourself to 30 days. In 30 days, I'm going to take it up to 45 minutes. Maybe add another day. So it's about moderation. It's all about that 1%, giving yourself 1% more each day, not 100. 1%. I should be 1% better today than I was yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we have our self-awareness, we have our self-empowerment, we have our self-care, and then what is our fourth pillar towards building our self-worth?
So the fourth one would be the self-love, right? So the self-awareness leads to, then the self-empowerment and the self-care, and all of those three, it leads to self-love. That's where you really start feeling so much better about yourself. That's when you really start to say, okay, I'm getting this self-love thing. Like, I'm starting to feel like, I love myself. Like, this is really dope. This is good. And that includes whatever that means for you, right? So when you get to a place where you start loving, like, oh, I feel like I'm loving myself. Like, for me, what that was for me when I got to that place, it was about getting clear with my values, my non-negotiables. Like, these are my values. Like, I value honesty. I value trust. Therefore, if I can't trust you and you're not being honest with me, this is just not going to work, because that is my non-negotiable value. I value peace. So if there's something happening around me that is messing with my peace, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. Like, when you get to a place where you start to, understand, feel self-empowered, and you're aware, and you're taking care of yourself, you really start to love on your stuff, and you start to value those things that really mean a lot to you. And that is a form of self-love. Knowing your values, your boundaries, standards, like, you get clear with those. Because when a woman who walks into a room that has all of the above, she doesn't even have to speak. You can actually see that in her aura, in her energy, in her vibe, right? You can see that she's a woman who respects herself, who cares for herself, who's self-empowered. But there are little things that you got to do that really show and tell people, including yourself, that you are a woman who loves herself. And for me, it was my values, standards, setting boundaries. Like, that was huge for me. Huge for me.
Yeah, what I love about the four pillars is like that's, self-awareness is starting where you are, like figuring out what do I need to invest in myself and my growth. And then it feels like the self-empowerment, the self-care, the self-love are those investments. So it's like you're starting where you are, you're figuring out what growth looks like for you, how you're going to empower yourself to have that growth, what sort of feelings do you want to feel, what does self-care look like to you, what is, respecting yourself, self-love, your boundaries, all of that look like. And that leads to building our self-worth, which is beautiful because it's kind of like this formula of, hey, if I can check these boxes, then maybe, like we talked about, the 1%, maybe I could feel 1% more of that tomorrow. And I could feel 1% more of that day after day. And we know consistency compounds. And as we feel that more and more, we live our truth more and more. And we are able to infiltrate that feeling into every aspect of our life, which is really what we want to be doing, is like feel that self-worth in every aspect of our life, whether it has to do with like our family, our home, our career, our school, our business, whatever it is. We want to show up as the most self-worthy person because the fact is we know what we want. We just have to figure out how to like get the feelings inside of us to actually go get there, and incite that action. And part of that is to feel worthy that we can take those actions because we're like, we can actually see it happening. And I think that's really like so beautiful.
Yes, it is. And it's, you could say, how do I know if I worthy myself, if I'm at a place where I have high self-worth? Well, one of the things that I struggled with for many years, um, in my 20s and 30s, geez, probably even in my early 40s, maybe a little, was, taking responsibility for my part, taking responsibility for, you know, my mistakes, so to say, right? So to speak. You know, when you are at a place of, high self-worth or self-worth, or, at a healthy level where you feel worthy, you take responsibility for your part. Because there's always your part, right? You take responsibility for your mistakes. And even if my part was just entertaining something that was toxic for me, so instead of saying, you're toxic and this, and you're blaming everything outside of you, it's, you know what? I'm actually going to take responsibility for entertaining this for far too long, for allowing myself to be in this situation for far too long, whatever that situation is. A person who has a high level of self-worth also doesn't mind saying sorry. You know, apologizing even if you did nothing wrong, but apologizing for whatever it is that that person feels like you did wrong. And it's not about me in this moment. I'm sorry that you feel that way. I really am. I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm sorry that whatever it is that I've done or haven't done, or just me maybe not being the person for you or the right person for this job, I apologize for what it's caused you. Whether you've lost time, energy, I apologize, right? So a person of high self-worth can do those two things.
And I mean, that really does go back to self awareness, right? Is being able to say, and I call it radical responsibility. I'm like, you got to take radical responsibility for your life. What is your part in it? And that's why I say, is there inaction? Like, was there actions that you wanted to take that you could have taken that didn't happen? And for whatever reason, and it's like it all circles back, right? So that inaction could circle back to forgiveness work that needs to happen because you should have taken action when you didn't. Or there's years after years after years of action that you wanted to take that you didn't. And so I love how it's all just like so intertwined. And I think that also makes it very difficult for people who are like, well, I want to raise my confidence. Well, I want to do more self care, or I want to love myself more. And the fact that it's all intertwined is like, well, if you just work on a little piece of this, then it leads to this other piece and it leads to this other piece. And then we get to that 1%, right? But I also think that like I like that this equation takes us to self-worth by building all these other pillars to get there. So you're doing the work, like I said, the checking those boxes as you're doing the work to kind of say like, am I feeling this? Do I have this? Am I taking responsibility for this area of my life? And if I'm not feeling self-care, it says self-care, right? Like I can't really blame that on anyone else if I'm not taking the responsibility of creating time for that or figuring out what it is that I like to do, and I'm thinking of what everyone else likes to do. And so that radical responsibility I think is crucial when it comes to doing any of this work.
Oh, it is crucial. And I would say, to start, just pick one thing that you can do in each pillar. So don't start thinking, okay, for self-empowerment, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E. No. Like again, you'll crash. It's just not going to, you'll feel overwhelmed. And, one of the things that we do just as, human nature, it's just who I think women especially, we're not patient with ourselves, and we do give up easily. We struggle when there's a lot of work to be done. We struggle with commitment and consistency. So I would say pick one thing that's going to make it easy to commit and easy to be consistent. So, for instance, if it's self awareness, write a truth letter to yourself. Your truth letter is your truth right now. Are you in debt? Write that out. How much are you owing? Write that out. You don't know how much you're owing? Okay, go and face the ugly stuff. Go do your credit check, go to the credit bureau and calculate everything, whatever it is. Don't just, I kind of think I'm owing about $10,000, or no, write it out. Like, it's your truth. If you don't face your truth, if you don't become super self aware, it's just not going to happen. So write yourself a letter. Are you in a toxic relationship? Don't just write, I'm in an unhealthy relationship. What's happening? Why is it unhealthy? Right? So really just get really clear in that letter, because when you take everything out of your head and heart and you put it on paper, it makes it concrete. It makes it really real. So that's one thing you can do with self-awareness. Don't think of, start with that. You can say, okay, like I just finished reading the 12-week year by Brian Moran. It was phenomenal. Such a great read about goal setting. So you can say, for the next 12 weeks with these pillars, I'm going to do one thing in each pillar. And then the next 12 weeks, you can choose another one thing, and give yourself time. And like we said, that is about that one thing, that 1%. With self-empowerment, it could be to read a book every 30 days for 3 months. So 3 books for the next 12 weeks, right? The book depends on what it is you're struggling with. What do you want to master? What do you want to overcome, heal from? Self-care, choose one thing. It could be working out Mondays and Wednesdays, right? So each pillar, just choose one thing that you can work on.
Love that. Yes, that's so good. And I like to create that tiny actionable tool, because we are talking about really deeply rooted stuff, right? And that self-worth has deep roots, requires deep digging. And so for us to offer listeners a way to sort of check these boxes one by one and be intentional about that, I think is amazing. So thank you for sharing that. I would also love for you to let us know how we could connect with you, and maybe a little bit about your business as well.
Yeah, so on most platforms, actually all platforms, I can be found at Elizabeth Correia. Actually, my Instagram and my Facebook got hacked a couple months ago. It was so
Oh, I'm
devastating,
so
but I
sorry.
did, yeah, yeah, I know. It was so hard. Oh gosh. Um, but I had to do a lot of, self empowerment work during that first month, because I was a hot mess. Let me tell you. So, but it's okay. I do have another page, Instagram. It's MS Elizabeth Correa, Facebook Elizabeth Correa, my website elizabethcorrea.com, TikTok Elizabeth Correa. So most platforms, YouTube, which I would love if you were to just get on there and subscribe and show some love. I am trying to focus on content and growing my YouTube channel for 2023, and I do have a couple of courses that they could, you could find on my at my website. I have a Discover Your One Thing freebie masterclass, which I could share with you. Taylor, I could share that with you after, to offer to your listeners. And yeah, obviously they can email me through my website if they've got any questions or just want to chat or share
Yeah.
something.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciated these 4 pillars towards building your self worth. So, we're starting with self awareness, we have self empowerment, self care, and self love, which all equal self worth. And we are giving listeners actionable tools to building their self worth. So, I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel so honored to have been here to share with you and your audience. Thank you.
All right, y'all, it is time for the quote of the episode, and this quote is from Robin Sharma. To double your net worth, double your self worth, because you will never exceed the height of your self image. Take that into your week, your month, and maybe even your year, and do one thing today to build your self-worth. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for being in my community. I'm so glad you showed up today, and let's go get there. Look at you, crushing it. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Tailor Made Tasty podcast. My hope is you always leave with a takeaway to implement in your own goal-crushing journey. I would love if you could take a moment to leave a review. And if you're looking for a community of goal boss badasses just like you, be sure to check out tailormadetasty.com/membership.